Trofena Mukuna. I'm the Executive Director of OSREA, Organization for Social Science Research in Eastern and Southern Africa. I have our partners here, whom I would like them to say something before we continue.
Hamjambo, Karibu, especially those who are from outside Kenya. I met a gentleman from Zimbabwe, Ariao. Karibu. My name is Michael Morago, and I'm representing PeaceNet. We're a partner with Trofena Australia Group in conducting this research, which we did last year in different places in Kenya and also in Uganda. For those of us who are not familiar with PeaceNet, we are a national networking organization for peace. And we network peace-building organizations, horizontally, community groups, vertically also linking with the state actors and also non-state actors. Particularly we work closely with NSC and other government agencies and UN agencies. And recently we are also partnering with the regional partners, and Austria is a good example, and IGAD. We are also trying to partner with those organizations because we are a networking organization. We believe there is value in networking for peace because we are consumers of peace, so we should also work at building it as well. And we also think there is value in the sense that when we come together, we can share our experiences, we can share our capacities, and sometimes even share our resources, particularly during this time when resources for peace building are becoming very scarce. So it's good for us to pool resources together. And so this activity today is an example of what networking for peace is about, as we are addressing the issue of countering violent extremism. We hope we have a good day today, and perhaps for me one of the outcomes will be that we will build our capacity to address violent extremism, so we can have greater peace for Kenya and for the region. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. As you heard, I'm Selena Wanjiri from the National Steering Committee on Peace Building and Conflict Management, which is in the Ministry of the Interior. I sit there as the desk officer, IGAD C1, and that gives us the reason why we are here. NSC, briefly, is a coordinating agency for peace initiatives in the whole country. And that is why you heard PeaceNet mention that they are working closely with us. We are in the Ministry of Interior, doing a lot of peace initiatives, coordinating all the agencies that are doing peace initiatives in this country. Narrowing down, we work with IGAD because in 2002, Kenya became the Conflict Early Warning and Early Response Unit as NSC, where it domesticated the IGAD protocol on early warning and early response initiatives. So NSC doubles as Conflict Early Warning and Early Warning and Early Response Unit as a member of IGAD. And that is why we are working closely with IGAD. Initially, IGAD was concentrating on cross-border, but of late they have expanded, and now they are also doing early warning inward in the countries. But most of the work that we have done, you realize, was concentrated at the cross-border of member states of the IGAD. So that is basically what we are doing, with a huge mandate of collecting information from the field and being able to transmit the same information to the responders so that we are able to get early response. And as NSC, we are saying that we want to move away from the issue of just being reactive and at least become more preventive. And that is why maybe we will see even more research is being done so that we are able to also just improve our collection of early information, because we realize that I think in the last few years, most of us have been responding to issues whenever they have already happened. But we are asking ourselves, are we really supposed to be just reactive? Or are we there to be able to prevent before it happens? So our approach is changing a bit, and we want to be more preventive than being reactive in our initiatives. So we still work with many partners. PeaceNet is one of them, and I am sure many of us who are seated here have interacted with NSC on many other occasions. But you're saying that for us to achieve our vision of peaceful, secure, and prosperous Kenya, we cannot walk alone. We need to work, all of us. And the other day we were looking at it and saying that there are many things that happen in our country, and the emerging trends have become so complicated that we are not sure whether the structures we work with as NSC, the ones we call the local peace committees, do they have the capacity to be able to respond to the emerging trends that are happening? Today we want to talk about CVE, and if you go to some counties that are really affected, they will tell you that when you come here, don't just mention the word terrorism. You need to coin it a bit and quote it, because nobody will come out and tell you openly that we have our sons and daughters who are involved in terrorism acts or violence acts, extremism. It is something that is contributing so much to conflicts at our local level and also cross-border. But we are saying that as much as we are hiding from it, are we able to handle the situations that are emerging? Are we able to handle even the conflicts that are arising from extractives, conflicts that are arising from mega project development projects? Not to mention, the other day we came in with two-tier government. We now have the national government and we have the county government. Are we really running smoothly to the two-tier governments, or are we experiencing some challenges even as we try to live with the two-tier governments? Is the county government working in tandem with the national government? Or are we struggling to ensure that we have peace in our counties? Are we able to even tell the county government staff that peace is an initiative that has to be carried out with both of us? Or is one of us staying with it and saying, this is my mandate? So it's something that we are working on, and we know that even in the region, violent extremism has become a threat to all of us. But last week we had a meeting, sorry I will take a bit of time. Last week we had a meeting and someone mentioned something and said that when we were being attacked and when Westgate was being bombed, we were with my brother here in that meeting, that the Ethiopians said they can never be attacked with such people. And then we're asking ourselves, what is it that the Ethiopians do that Kenyans need to copy, so that we can also stand proudly and say that if the region is being attacked, Kenya will not be attacked? Are we able to say that? What is it that they do? So even as a region, we have lessons to learn from our neighbors. And these lessons will build our institutions. These lessons will improve our deliverance. These lessons will make Kenya peaceful, secure, and prosperous. That is the vision we have at NSC, that we'll all live in peace, that we'll all be able to share information across the platform. Because information, for me, for us to have a peaceful nation, then we need to have an open communication line. Because we can all be in Nairobi doing the same job, doing the same thing, but because we don't share information, we might not be able to achieve a wholesome output. But when me and you share information, then we'll be able to come up with a preventive way and not just being reactive. Thank you very much.
I would like to really thank our partners. We have worked with them throughout. PeaceNet is our implementing partner, both in Kenya and Uganda. We could not come to the field or know the communities where to collect data if it wasn't for PeaceNet directing us and guiding us. We are indebted to you. Thank you very much. We appreciate you very much. Here in Nairobi, led by Gertrude and the rest of the team, we were taken to areas some of us had never gone to. And we had very interesting discussions with the youth. Some things which we read about in papers and some information which is misrepresented sometimes, maybe to please a particular audience. We had time and we were able to interact with these youth, both in affluent communities and also in the informal settlements. It was very interesting to meet youth who are at the university, from basically who have a lot of hope and are looking at their future as very bright. They want to be the presidents and all. And we also met youth who are in informal settlements who even their parents feel that they don't know if they will be there the next day. So it was interesting to see this dichotomy in research. In Mombasa, when we went there, we were welcomed by Mama Jilani. We were very much at home. Thank you very much. And she took us to see even the county commissioner. You will see him on the screen, and other important officials of the government. We are very, very grateful. We wouldn't have managed that because OSRE is a regional organization, and getting those permissions to reach to the grassroots is not easy. So thank you very much. I want to thank IGAD C1 for linking us to the Ministry of Interior and Security. And other than that, they got the Siwerus to work with us everywhere we went. We were with them in the field, everywhere we went. And the same procedure also happened in Uganda. We were with them in the field. They would tell us, we will not go to this location today. It's better for us to go to another one because of the intelligence reports that they had received. That was very important. And for my team, now we formed a team whom we were collecting data with, and we have continued working together, and they have kept on updating us. You are all here present. I won't mention you by name. You know what you are doing. But to yourselves as individuals, to your country, to your communities in this particular research, I want to thank you very much. I would like to welcome the PI of this research to take us through the literature review that has guided us in doing this research up to now. Thank you.
First of all, I want to give you the background and the context of violent extremism in the IGAD region, which is out there in the literature. IGAD is predominantly known to be in the accident of geography. As written by UNDP, the accident of geography means the location by which IGAD lies actually borders some of the areas that are seriously affected by ideology, religious extremism, and so forth. And we have these coastline areas, which is geographically harboring an environment where extremism exists. So accident of geography comes into that, and this borderline of the Indian Ocean is, and yet there is also internally divided with so many ethnic groups. Take Ethiopia alone, Kenya alone, Uganda, and Somali, and all that. So we have very diverse, internally, ethnically divided people, and economically marginalized in all areas we have looked at. Multi-composition of religions and religious groups exist in this area, in the region. The persistence of conflict in the IGAD region, very volatile, all along, since the 60s, since the 50s. And even up to today, we can still attest to that. The absence of state structures, fragility and collapse of states, like in Somalia, we have seen that, has contributed quite a lot. The increasing youth bulge living in the region, very apparent in Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, Ethiopia. Over 75% of the population are youth, or they are under 35. And the changing worldview and vulnerability of youth living in despair, from the loss of hope, vulnerability to radicalization, extremism, and violent behaviors amidst growing extremism. Very apparent, we are seeing this increasing trend, and the worldview is changing. And when we look at the GCC, the Gulf Coordination Council reports, states very clearly that what is happening in Yemen, what is happening in Qatar, what is happening in Saudi Arabia directly affects the region, the IGAD region. So this is bringing some changing views on peace and security, the coalition between different groups, different countries in the IGAD region. If you look at the interaction between Eritrea and Sudan, Ethiopia and Sudan and Uganda and South Sudan, all these dynamics is beginning to change the worldview and redefining the multiple changes of conflict in the region. The IGAD region is host to the largest population of refugees in Africa, which is a key population that is very vulnerable to violent extremism and radicalization. A point in case here is the decongestion of Kakuma and other refugee centers, where some of these people do not have anywhere to go, and they're very easy prey for recruitment to radical groups. There are also accusations and counter-accusations by neighboring states, which are proxy, providing proxy support to religious extremism groups, causing security discomfort for other countries. For example, Eritrea has been accused several times that it is hosting Al-Shabaab, and they deny and so forth. So these counter-accusations are providing discomfort for other countries. The region has unsecured border territories with insignificant capacity gaps to control the porosity of the borders, insufficiently controlled coastlines, lack of a sound legislative framework to counter terrorism, and swaths of barely governed territory. A case in point is what has just recently happened in Muyale, where there has been, confrontation from the government with the Borana in Muyale of Ethiopia side and the Kenyan side, causing all these situations. The borders of most IGAD countries are porous, and it allows for small arms to move freely. It allows for some information to be easily transported across the borders. The introduction of extremist religious ideology into what essentially was a combustible mix of frustrations and contradictions has contributed further to the radicalization of susceptible groups and the ready acceptance of violence. This fits mainly the youth, which is very, very, very dangerous. And this is where we are also focusing on this combustible mix of frustration among youth and how they end with hopelessness, unemployment, and so forth. That takes us to the drivers, which I will talk briefly about. Improving border control and monitoring of unpatrolled coastlines, I've mentioned. Strengthening interdepartmental cooperation is sometimes not very, very good. You find different departments within the same, within the country doing the same thing. And then upgrading communication equipment and facilities, sharing of information we have talked about. Combating terrorism, financing, how illicit financial flows are moving around in the region. How do these terrorists finance themselves? Sometimes we still don't get it right. And detecting document forgery and combating arms trafficking, supporting CVE legislation, strengthening democratic institutions, judiciary systems, improving governance, and so forth. Institutionally, is still a problem. All this, we found that there are gaps in the entire region. And then there's lack of knowledge and public support from people, from governments, for counterterrorism efforts in the IGAD region. If anything, probably we still don't have a well-developed center that can coordinate and share information with us. we have only country cases, country strategies. IGAD is still developing its own center. So the sharing of information is still a problem due to lack of a proper response, respect for human rights and rule of law. We might get to know the information after 6 months, 7 months or so, when things have happened. So again, the background touches a lot on the social, economic, political, social, and religious impact on a wide population in the IGAD region, especially where women, youth, and children are disposed of as vulnerable groups to violent extremist groups. Most of the reasons given are actually along the socio-economic, political, and social and religious impact on either families or an institution or a group of people, ethnic group, or so forth. And that comes with the drivers that we'll talk about. And therefore, the women and youth, male and female, have become very, very important part of CVE programming, but also for our research. And literatures tend to touch also on these issues. The engagement and inclusion of youth into national and regional formulation and implementation of policies and legislative frameworks to assist them to counter and prevent violent extremism has become very important, but is lagging behind. There are many documents on youth policies, but they are not harmonized. Some of them are actually not even done in the interest of the youth, are not validated by youth themselves, and the youth don't think such a document represents their views in both Uganda and Kenya. And in addressing all the points stated above, making the women and youth a very important part of the CVE programming has become very essential for us, and I think also for the governments of Kenya and Uganda today. Very little is known about the youth engagement and inclusion into the national and regional formulation and implementation of legislative framework that can assist in the CVE, which has become very important. I've mentioned this. Many people would disagree with this point that very little is known. Others will say, yes, it is too much. Everybody now know about it. The problem here is how do you engage the youth and include them at the national and the regional level to formulate and engage the very particular youth. The formulation and the engagement of youth comes when this policy is already out. It is only thrown to them. So let's take note of that. In Kenya, for example, Kenya has been cited several times in literatures as having many, many underlying political, social, and economic problems that has to date exposed the country to violence and violent extremism and terrorism. I'll put it in a bigger picture. We can talk about elections. We can talk about socioeconomic issues. We can talk about the intervention of Kenya in Somalia has many, many, many reasons, but I'll put it in a bigger picture. So, as I mentioned, Kenya went into Somalia in October 2012, and sympathizers of Al-Shabaab attacked Kenya on that basis. Kenya has historical legacy of ethnic and regional discrimination, especially access to education has been cited in several literature. Jobs opportunity, very, very many. Citations, healthcare, clean water, electricity, and serviceable roads and treatment by local police and justice officials from all over the country. If you look at the coastline, if you go to Garissa, if you go to Western Province, and so forth, informal settlements here in Nairobi, you get all this information which is cited quite widely in the literature. Kenya has intense structural inequality pitting the growing youth population with limited economic opportunity combined with the effects of insecurity. This is from the UNDP report from 2013. It's being replicated, being talked about. And Kenya's political, economic, and social disparities and intercommunal conflicts that drive violence and violent extremism of concern is there. And if you look at some of the findings that will be presented, those who were killed in Mombasa, in Garissa, if you look at the names of people on that stone, you would find almost 3/4 of the net are actually students from Western Province, and that gives you some kind of questions in your mind. And then some of the findings we discovered in Mombasa actually will be surprising, that women are more into that, and from a particular region, and the question would be why. The same in Uganda, you will also be surprised that these kind of findings are there. But it's because of these diverse political and economic and social disparities. The government is about to realize a national counter-violent extremism strategy that has been developed in cooperation with non-governmental actors. This is 2016, but to date, I don't know. But maybe the officials here can tell us where the strategy is now. But at least what we have found in the research is that Kenya has a strategy which is more developed compared to Uganda, which is still developing. A counterterrorism strategy, a violent extremist strategy. In as far as the youth are concerned, there are several strategies which are being directed by civil society and so forth. So we could talk about that. And as I said, Kenya already has counter-terrorism efforts, which also is being criticized in different ways, and I don't know how far today those criticisms have helped Kenya to come up with a comprehensive strategy, but it is there. I wouldn't want to talk more about this. There are direct linkages between conflict and violent extremism. Let me just jump over that. Probably we could say today, most religious extremist groups engage in conflicts, which are attached to fight for territory, sometimes resources, sometimes defense for their understanding and their ideology, and how the interpretation of those religious ideologies are made, and the texts and doctrines, and how they want to defend that by force. So there is a direct link between conflict and violent extremism in the IGAD region. And also there is the different varying levels of conflict that start from interpersonal, individuals, to families, to communities, and then to regions, and maybe to the entire group, or entire country and IGAD region. And therefore you will find that there is disruption by conflict that conflict brings, and then within the family there's a breakdown. Maybe we'll find that also we have done that as part of our concern for collecting data. Social networks begin to develop in different ways, and consequently there is a very sharp rise to violent extremist groups in IGAD region, not only in Kenya. And the linkages between conflict and extremism also has religious connotation. And if you look at the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, their extremist thinking with conflict, with fighting, harming and attacking governments, is that they want to establish a constitution which is based on 10 commandments of God to guide them to lead the country. Not the normal constitution that we know of, but it's the Bible, the 10 commandments of God. So there is a direct link between conflict, violent extremism, and governance. And probably even, as we will see, development. So basically, we have many groups, like another group, if you can take from other areas, not necessarily IGAD, the neo-Nazis, they were fighting for that, the Ku Klux Klan, the eco-tourism, there are many, Boko Haram, using Sharia law in order to rule the country. So violent extremism, conflict, and development and governance as a wider picture that we need to take into consideration. There is the question that we need to ask ourselves, whether conflict generates violent extremism, or the other way around, or both. So The US Institute for Peace believe that extremist movements such as ISIS, Boko Haram, the Taliban, and Al-Shabaab, they fuel and often stem from instability and violent conflict and present a complex challenge. So they think that they come out of the situations that is already being generated, and then they cause more instability with ideology behind all that. There is a direct link between conflict, youth, violent extremism, and development. Let me jump over this one. There is also a direct link between conflict, youth, violent extremism, development, and gender. You will ask me maybe later, because I want Rufina also to come in and let me not take all the time. But I want you to be alert that the connection between conflict, youth, probably I could say violent conflict, which is war, youth, violent extremism, development, and gender, they're all connected. And we found that in our research, and in literatures, yes, they do exist. Sometimes women who are in violent extremist groups are termed as mad, insane, they have lost it, they're not mothers anymore. But also 101 and literature says there are women who are recruited into the military. The normal military, police, prisons, and they act in accordance to the law. Women can fight. Women can shoot to kill. There's a research that has been conducted that says that transforming gendered stereotypes that women cannot do this is wrong. Therefore, it requires us to do some kind of structural preferential needs research for both male and female, for both girls and boys, to look at them equally. So if you go to the field, you don't need to look at girls as very soft, they cannot shoot, they cannot do what. No. What the boys can do today is what the girls can also do. So literature is beginning to tell us that, yes, we need to think about that. That aside, what are some of the drivers that Rufina will present some of them in findings? But literature says very clearly that enablers of violent extremism are very multiple, very many, very complex, usually context specific. We have heard from Zimbabwe that their context is very different, but we are doing the same sort of research for youth, but their context vary. And I would still again emphasize that, yes, context matters. If you look at our research process, you will also see that the context matters, and there are some issues of religious, ideological, political, economic, and historical dimension to all the drivers that we'll be talking about. Context here, even within a country, there is a different context. What do I mean? Within Kenya, the context of Mombasa is different from the context of Garissa, from Nairobi, although there are certain common elements. Research that we have conducted will tell us. Many researchers have found that the drivers of violent extremism show lack of authoritative statistical data, which we thought it is important to give us some pathways and maybe come up with some inclusive mechanism. So these are all repeated. There are processes. Some of the drivers depend on the processes. That means the radicalization process. And when does radicalization start? For example, we found in our research, and then literature also says radicalization sometimes starts at birth. Others at 4 years, 3 years. And there are institutions behind it, and these institutions start from family, and so forth. So a child is born into radicalization without knowing the difference, so he's ready. So when you talk about those drivers, look at the processes, look at the particular drivers, look at the motivations, look at the enablers, things that make you, force you, or allow you to get in there. And then there are some summaries of what they call push and pull factors. Let me go fast. Push factors are structural conditions, mostly in literatures. Those structural conditions are underdevelopment, unemployment, political repression, social marginalization. For example, that can fuel grievance, which in combination with other factors may help push an individual or a group of people to join violent extremist groups. Push factors could also be real or just perceived. Somebody would go into a particular community and say, you know, this particular group of people don't like us, come with us. So it could be real or even perceived. Then we have the push factors, what pushes people out there. These are individual backgrounds, like families I talked about, motivations, which are like collective grievance. They have always been against us. Let's do something. We have a group to join them. So they just subjugation, oppression, domination, victimization, and distortion, foreign intervention sometimes, misuse of beliefs, political repression and ideologies, ethnic belonging and political differences and leadership and social networks. These are some kind of push factors. And of course the state also can push individuals to join violent extremist group by their own intervention. Going into a community and shooting everybody who is suspected. And the husbands, the wives lose their husbands, and the women, they say, what else am I left with? I will just go and join. So government intervention sometimes also can push people to join groups. Human rights issues are also mentioned, and minority targeted groups ranging from gender inequality are also targeted. We also found in some of the areas, and the research also talks about, for example, gay people in Uganda are not accepted. They run away, they come in another country, and they can easily be targeted for recruitment. And those stigmatization also, those who are probably infected HIV, they have nothing to lose, they know they will die, some of them don't want to take medication, they just join the group, go and explore themselves. Simple. The pull factor, this appeals, for example, the existence of well-organized violent extremist group who will compel through this process, and then will pull you through, using your feelings, your history, your background, and then they pull you in. They lure you in by providing outlets, money, and so forth, promises, then you come in. Attraction of charismatic individuals. There could be one person who is very charismatic, very eloquent, he's talking very nicely, and then you join. Religious ideologies have so many times been cited in literatures as one of the primary reasons why youth join violent extremism. And also the recruitment of youth sometimes is done in such a way that they will show some videos that has been recorded somewhere which is against youth in a particular area because they are treated because of their religion, and then they say, this is your brother, Allahu Akbar, you have to do something. So the banning of, the drawing of maybe Mohammed in Hebdo area appeals to almost all the youth who are akin to the ideology of Muslim, Islam. And they would do something even in the streets of Nairobi because of that incident. So sometimes those are the motivations. Gender-based motivations, I've already talked about it. And, but the overall conclusion about gender is that women make decisions to join armed organizations for much the same reason as men. I will still repeat this. In any case, it is now even more than the women, more women than men that join. Literature say equal. So in our research, we found in certain areas, women are the majority who are joining and active, both active and passive. By that, I don't know what you will ask me. Active means what we see here. carrying guns in the bras, inside the bras, knives, moving around and leading gangs for hire, and so forth. So, but we also found that what research needs to look at is passive violent extremist group. You never suspect someone, you never know that. We have found that in Mombasa, that we will share with you. Passive, living with you. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, something happens and you cannot believe this is a person you knew before. But where does it come from? How do we begin to measure somebody is extremist? To be an extreme person is not bad in any way, but violent. So violent is an end game to it. So we have found that women and men are both equally represented. Quickly, I am left with about 2 or 3 slides, if you allow me. There are some strategies that are also highlighted in the literature. For example, global strategy is the common UN global counterterrorism strategy, which is there, and we have found that the General Assembly resolution has actually approved it, and they have also provided a plan of action based on that to prevent violent extremism. And the member states, many member states have ratified that, and they are using that from June 2016. It's reviewed. We have also the AU, which is the Continental Protocol on Anti-Terrorism, which is there. And many states are also using UK Counterterrorism Strategy of 2011, and then the European Union's Counterterrorism Strategy 2005. They all identify the major motivations for terrorist violence to be struggle for power and justice. And youth are not mentioned, mostly, into that. UNDP also have developed an approach, which is a liberal approach, and their belief is that you can actually counter the violent extremism using economic development. If you empower people economically, then you are able to improve good governance, leadership, and so forth. It is up to us to decide whether the UNDP approach is the best, is a liberal approach, and others say, yeah, it's not actually the best. Probably we need to go beyond development and good governance. So for them, the tool is dialogue, maybe soft loans and training and sort of capacity building, and giving sufficient condition for building social capital and trust. There are some strategies that uses punitive approach. This is mostly by governments, and this punitive approach contributes to both pull and push factor. And in most cases, it has been criticized a lot. Others say, yeah, let us rethink the new strategy, and what is it? This global discourse should be domesticated, and each country should develop their own strategy and rethink their own strategy. So we have that.